My hand split into 12 fingers lined with raw, open wounds. My wrist rolled like a cobra fixing its eyes on a prey animal. This was no longer an arm. It was a nest of flesh-colored snakes. My mind blanked. I fell backwards, smacking at my arm as if trying to kill it. I couldn't feel a thing. It was as if all sense of touch ended at my shoulder. I crawled backwards on the floor, trying to wave my arm away, but it clung to me like a parasite fixed on my shoulder. Seconds later, a searing pain ran up my arm. Looking down on my hand, it looked as it always had. It was just a hand with a burn. I could barely feel it through the pounding in my chest. Every noise in the room was overshadowed by my pulse. I ran my hand under a tap and wrapped a cold pack around the wrist. It wasn't a bad burn, but it wasn't nothing. I did some research, looking up news from around the time my accident took place. There were a couple of reports, but nothing out of the ordinary. A domestic call, a brawl at a local restaurant, a couple of missing pets. There were a couple of other reports, but they were short and didn't lead anywhere. A mention of a couple of disturbances. Some idiot blasting music in a parking lot. But there was one more thing I noticed. In one of the reports covering my accident, there was a picture of the car. There was a spatter of blood on the hood, with something meaty stuck in the grill, as if I'd hit an animal. That caught my interest. I couldn't remember hitting anything, so what the hell was that about? The next day, my arm was acting up even worse. It kept going cold, as if circulation was cutting in and out. Before heading out, I wrapped it up in bandages, partly because of the cold sensation and partly because I just didn't trust it. There was no way to tell what could happen or why. I managed to get a hold of the owner of the junkyard, where my trash car had been towed. I went over there early in the day, just before the fog cleared. Now, this was long after the car had been crushed and stored, but it was the only lead I had. An older woman greeted me at the gates, letting me in. We had a short chat about the accident as she showed me around, ending up at a stack of metal that could hardly be recognized as anything. The only thing to even hint at my car being in that pile was a thin slice of colored metal from one of the doors. I dug around there for about 20 minutes, all while being observed by this old woman. "Yeah, won't find much," she said. "If the police didn't get it, the insurance folks did. Been a lot of people digging around?" "Not a lot," she said, shaking her head, "but you ain't the first." And she was right. There wasn't a drop of blood or bone or anything. It was just scrap metal and a pile of even more scrap metal. I was wasting my time. But as I was about to leave, I noticed something. I hadn't thought about it, but I could see the old woman was wearing a ring. It looked like a wedding ring at first, but she was wearing it on the wrong finger. I pointed to it. "You found that?" "What about it?" she asked. "It's got a tune engraved on the side, right? Like a music note?" There was no response. She just looked at me and sighed. Turns out I was right. She gave it back. She'd found it near the hood of the car the night they brought it in. Grabbing it was just a spur-of-the-moment thing, and since no one had come asking for it, she'd kept it. I was a bit annoyed, but mostly relieved that I got it back. The question remained, how had that ended up at the hood of the car? There was all kinds of gunk just kind of hanging there, she said. "Figured it was an animal." "And you're sure that's where you found it?" Sure can be, yeah." I stood there for a moment, feeling an uncomfortable thought forming in the back of my head. There was no way for that ring to go from my broken arm on the driver's side to a pile of meat stuck in the grill of the car. But the proof of it had been in front of me all along. I'd worn that ring for 12 years. There was a permanent indent on my finger. Looking down at my left hand, there was no such indent. This wasn't my arm. As soon as that thought settled in my mind, I could feel the arm twist and turn. Hadn't it been there for the bandages, there's no way to tell what it would have done. It squirmed and pulled against me, thrashing like a dying fish on land. The old woman just looked at me. "You alright? You want me to call someone?" she asked. I don't know," I said. "I don't know." I had to get to the bottom of this. I hurried out of there as fast as I could. It was getting late in the afternoon when I got back home. Grabbing an old backpack and a couple of painkillers, I was about to head right back out. But a thought hit me. Maybe it wasn't as abstract as I thought. Maybe it wasn't just a feeling, maybe something was really there. Looking down at my arm, I could feel it stirring, just within my control. Something sleeping, waiting to spring into action. With my right hand on the front door, I stopped and spoke out loud. Whatever you want, just don't, I said. Don't. There was no response, no stirring. On a spur-of-the-moment whim, I packed one more thing into my backpack, just in case. A Hail Mary. Making my way to the scene of the accident, it was impossible to tell anything had ever happened there. I could barely even make out the place where I swerved, or where my wheel got caught in the ditch. I found the general area in the field where my car had spun out of control, and from there it was easy to find the tree I'd smashed into. It was still there. I spent hours going over it all, following the path the car had taken, starting from that tree and working my way back. There was nothing there. Nothing new. It was all just gravel, weeds, and pavement. What had I expected? A signed confession? As the sun dipped behind the clouds, I could feel a cold wind coming on. I'd lost track of time. As I turned back, there was a sudden cramp in my arm. A shock of pain crept up my spine, spreading throughout my body like a spider's web. I could feel my left arm throbbing against the bandage wrap. Something was wrong. I was in the middle of the field. I could see for miles in every direction. Cars passing by in the distance, wet grass staining my pants all the way up to my knees. In this one cold wind, cutting straight through my clothes. I shivered, but my left arm didn't. Taking a step backward toward where I came from, another shot of pain struck me. This one tripped me, sending me face first into the grass. It knocked the air out of my lungs. I rolled over on my back, gasping for breath. My left hand was creeping up my stomach like a spider with a meaty tail. It stopped over my face, tapping the bridge of my nose with the index finger. I couldn't feel a thing. Moving to push it off, it instead struck back, grasping my right hand in return. Stop, I wheezed as I sat back up. Just stop this. But it didn't. I just sat there, a wounded man holding his arms. I struggled back and forth for well over half an hour, getting back on my feet only to get knocked back down. By the time I'd made my way back to the road, I looked like I'd been hiking for miles. My hair was a mess, and my clothes were covered in grass and mud. I had a handprint across my face like I'd smacked myself. I trusted myself with a short drive to get there, but I wasn't sure about going back. It felt reckless to get behind a wheel in my state. Still, I couldn't just walk all the way back home, and having it towed would be a pain in the ass. I got back in my car while I thought about it, wiping myself off with a towel from my backpack. It'd gotten dark outside. The overcast didn't help. I could almost taste the rain. I contemplated my options and figured that if I kept it slow and only used my right arm, I could carefully make my way home. I put the keys in and turned on the headlights. There was an elk standing in front of my car. It sniffed the hood of my car curiously, then proceeded to stare me down. I was just surprised. I got a good look at it. There was something wrong with one of its hind legs. It lacked fur, and there was a sort of spreading baldness reaching halfway up the side of the body. My arm was slowly rising on its own, as if looking over the dashboard. The elk recoiled, as if in pain, and set off in a troubled three-legged gallop. It disappeared into the woods. Looking down at my arm, a stray thought hit me. Was this spreading too? I painstakingly made my way back home. I dropped my backpack in the hallway, locked my front door, and collapsed into the shower. I was exhausted. I stood in the shower for about half an hour looking down at my mother's ring. I was wearing it on my right hand now, but it just didn't feel the same. That wasn't there where it was meant to be. Still, it was nice to have it back. Whenever I turned the ring a little, I could feel the engraving against my skin. It was a little gesture I did when I was anxious as a reminder that I was still there. I got dressed and ready for a slow evening at home without any further drama. My arm wasn't acting up, but as I passed through the hallway, something didn't feel right. At first, I couldn't say what it was. Maybe the hum of a lamp or some air duct acting up. I wasn't sure, but it was something. It had to be. I stepped up to the front door. There used to be a light coming from the hallway outside. That light was always on, and there should be a little light coming in through the peephole. But there wasn't. Had a fuse blown? I had a closer look. There was someone just outside my door. A click. My left hand had unlocked the door. The door flung open, knocking me back. A tall silhouette, close to 7 feet tall, pushed its way into my apartment. It was dressed in a sort of black poncho covering its face with layers of bandages. A single frog-like eye stared me down as it pushed forward. I scrambled backwards on the floor. It was fast. Damn fast. It stepped forward and reached for one of my legs, but I managed to pull away in time. I got back on my feet, barely managing to pull my left arm along. It was trying to grab a hold of something, as if to slow me down. In a spur-of-the-moment decision, I grabbed a lamp from the windowsill, throwing it across the room. The intruder ducked, then it came at me again. I ducked under just in time and headed for the door. As I reached the front door, my left arm tried to force it shut. I fought against myself to get out, but it was useless. The door was shut and locked, and my left hand refused to budge. The 7-foot-tall shape came around the corner, slowly approaching. I had to think of something. Anything. My backpack. It was right there. I had packed a couple of things earlier, a towel, some bandages, painkillers, and a water bottle. But I'd also packed some lighter fluid. Seeing as how my left arm had reacted so violently to boiling water, I had the stupid idea that the prospect of a straight-up fire would do something even worse to it. It didn't seem so stupid anymore. I grabbed lighter fluid and sprinkled it on my left arm. The tall shape stopped, seemingly reacting to the smell of it. I wanted to say something, but all that came out were empty breaths. We were like animals, circling each other, waiting for one to make the first move. I emptied the lighter fluid, grabbing a box of matches. I held the box with my mouth and a triplicate of matches in my hand. I spilled the rest on the floor. For a moment, we just looked at one another, a single inhuman eye peeking through the bandage wraps, the vague shape of 4, maybe 5 extremities at its side. How many arms did this thing hide under the poncho? A flash of realization came to me. This is what I had almost hit with my car. And with that, I lit the matches. It leapt at me, but it was too late. The moment the open flame touched my skin on my left arm, it detached. The open nerves just let go of me, and the thing fell off my body. It squirmed on the floor like a dying animal, grasping at whatever its fingers could reach. Adrenaline forced me out of the door. A heartbeat behind me, the 7-foot-tall figure scooped up my burning arm and pushed past me. Within seconds, it was gone, leaving me with an open wound in the stairwell, smelling of lighter fluid. One of the neighbors called for help. I didn't even notice how much blood I was losing, but it was bad. They sent me back into emergency surgery, this time without an arm to reattach. It was deemed that the wound was self-inflicted, a result of some stress-induced psychosis. I wanted to agree, but I saw what I saw. I've been trying to convince myself otherwise, but I lived this. This wasn't any other life but mine. I've since learned to live with a full prosthetic. It's not much, but I can trust it, and I can wear my mother's ring the way it was supposed to be. It started to make an indent on the synthetic skin. I don't like to think about what would have happened if I'd let that thing stay on, but just a couple of weeks ago I got an answer. I was stuck in traffic looking out over the fields when I saw a group of elks in the distance. One of them had no fur, not at all.